Morning, here we go. This is, oh gosh, part one of real property and tenant law. There'll actually be three parts to this. One's going to be the real property here, then we're going to look at tenant law, and finally we're going to look at environmental law, which kind of goes with the property. So here we go. Kind of interesting things that you may want to know if you're buying a house. It goes with the mortgage information we had on Monday. So let's begin. Looking at the nature of real property, which involves land, buildings, plants and trees, anything attached to the property that you buy. Your rights exist or run to or go as far as beneath the surface of the land to the middle of the earth. You could have, or the rights may have been, mineral rights may have been sold on a property, so you always want to make sure you understand other rights that have been sold on the property you may be buying. The airspace goes to the top of the atmosphere. Planes do not violate unless they're low and frequent, such as if somebody puts an airport right next to you and starts flying over your land, you may have cause for a suit or at least a cease and desist. Plants and vegetation, they add value to the land, so they're part of the land. If you have crops that are in the ground when you sell the land, those are usually part of the land unless it's otherwise noted. And if it is otherwise noted and you sell it aside from the land, it is actually personal property. And finally, there's fixtures. And I'm sure you've heard of building and fixtures type thing. Well, a fixture in property, okay, is personal property in theory closely associated with the building itself. Let's say an example given in the book was plumbing and electrical wiring. They are affixed and they're a fixture, and they would be included in the selling of the building as part of real property. And that would be because it's very difficult to disassociate with those particular items with the real property. I see we have a question already. Gosh, that's early in the game, but go do your question, and I'll meet you back at ownership interests. Short and quick, right? Alright, here we go. We talked about personal property and having a fee simple for the bundle of rights. Well, with ownership of real property, we have the same thing, fee simple, absolute, and that means that you have the right to use the property reasonably. With all the rights, you can use it however you wish, you can dispose of it however you wish, so you have full rights, and that's a bundle of rights. You can let's say somebody moves next door to you and suddenly you can't enjoy your property. They're very obnoxious. They're creating havoc all through the night. You can't sleep. You can't go out in your yard because they're harassing you, or for whatever reason. Or if you live in the country, somebody may put a hog operation up next to you. By law, they can do that, but it creates a nuisance because you can't go out in your yard because of the smell, whatever. You can actually go to court and file a tort civil suit for nuisance because it's interfering with your enjoyment of the property. So there are some rights that you have if somebody starts to interfere with your the availability of using your property with enjoyment. Also, that could go if they devalue your property with whatever they've done on their property. Goes both ways too. So then you have something called life estates, and that's where you have life tenancy. A lot of people will do this when they donate their land or put their land into a foundation or license it. I don't know if I want to call it license it. Place it in a receiver, a foundation that the land will go to them. This foundation after your death. So you have what they call a life estate. Also, in some cases, farmers used to do this. They would sell their land and their property, but they would retain the right to live in the house until their death. And then that too would pass to whoever bought the land. So life estates, you have a right to the property for life, and after that, that right transfers to whoever holds the deed. There's non-possessory interest, a right to access but not possess. And we all work with those easements, which is limited use of the property. Usually that's a right-of-way to access the property. Utility companies use that, city municipals. Or if your property is the only access to, say, a field behind you, and a farmer needs access to that field, then there's an easement that they have a right to use to access their property. There's something called profits, and that's the right to access the property and remove something of worth. Let's say you have a big sandhill, and you tell somebody who's needs the sand for cement or whatever, that they have the right to go in and remove that sand hill. That's a profit. The other one is a license, and that's a revocable right to enter property. Think of this as a ticket to a theater. You have the right to enter that theater with that ticket, or to a baseball game, or to any type of sporting event. You have the right to enter, but you have no right to remove anything of worth from that building without proper payment for it. So 3 ways, non-possessory interests. That kind of wraps up the ownership interest, and we'll look at transfer of ownership, or what they commonly call conveyance. We'll look at sales contracts and implied warranty of habitability. So you can transfer ownership by gift, by a will, by possession, and by eminent domain. I think the top 3, by possession here, you could have adverse possession, which is one of the ways that it mentions in the book, and that literally means you take possession of it in front of the world and all, and you, after a certain amount of time, that just by law, by right of possession, that land is yours. By eminent domain is when the government or a arm of the government may buy your land from you by declaration for the betterment, for the common good. And that has to be at fair market value. Eminent domain can really cause some grief for many people, and it's fairly difficult to fight against. So, and we'll talk more of that later on. Real estate contracts, sales contracts, must, when you transfer or convey this, you need to have some type of contract or document. The purchase price, the type of deed, condition of the land. Usually when you're buying real estate, it's contingent on financing, and not only contingent on financing, it has to be surveyed, so that there's a good legal description of the land. There are several inspections, depending on what type of mortgage you're getting, or if you're borrowing money. There are inspections that have to take place. I'm thinking HUD or any government mortgage, there are certain requirements that have to be met. There's an implied warranty of habitability, which means, and it's implied, it's not even written, in many cases, that the property's fit to be lived in, and that's simply implied. That implied warranty may pass, and usually does pass on to future buyers. So if you sell something and you're implying it's fit to live in, especially with real estate, and it is the seller's duty to disclose any hidden defects. And a lot of times if this is not taken care of, the contract can be made void, and you may have to fix that defect. And we do have another question. So you skip over to that, and I'm going to hop over and finish up the transfer of ownership when you get done with that question. And we are now looking at, so we've had the contract, but you have to have a deed. And even if it's a gift, you have to have a deed, and it has to be recorded. And the deed has to have the name of the buyer and the seller. Words that indicate the intent to convey, something like, I do hereby transfer this land to XXX. There's got to be a legal description of the land, which goes back up to that survey. Needs to have the grantor's signature, and the deed has to be delivered, given to. And there are 3 types of warranty deeds that the book brings up, and one is a warranty deed, which is the highest degree of protection. When you buy property, they will search the abstract and come back and do a search of title, they call it, and bring back an abstract that pretty well gives the entire history of the property and whether there are any judgments against it or liens against it. This warranty deed it is very important because it ensures that the land you're buying or the property you're buying has no judgments against it. The grantor has the title and the power to convey. That's what it says. There's a covenant of quiet enjoyment, which says they won't bother you once the property has changed hands. There's no knowledge of any adverse judgments against it or any issues that could interrupt your quiet enjoyment. And the grantor is liable for to-date defects that are found if they're not disclosed already. So that's a really solid protection plan, highest degree of protection. There's a special warranty deed that says the title is good, but only for the duration of the grantor's ownership, which says it only is good for, let's say I own a property for 10 years, and I sell it, and it has a special warranty deed on it, which means the search and the investigation of the deed is only done for those 10 years, nothing prior to or before the history. So that only says within my tenure of owning that land is that deed free and clear. It has nothing to do with anything previous. And the last one, which has the least degree of protection, is called a quitclaim deed. And that only conveys or transfers what rights I had at the time. And sometimes those rights are uncertain. There was an example. A friend of mine bought riverfront property, and the property was obviously, I think, 2 or 3 lots with a little cabin on it. But to the right of that property was a very large woods. And the owner said, I can give you a quitclaim deed on that because I've always had rights to use that. But I can't give you a warranty deed or a special warranty deed because there's been no search and there is no certainty of my rights, of the rights to continue. That's a quitclaim deed, basically. But only the rights that they had are conveyed, and that was the right to access that particular land. So after those are all done, you have the deed drawn up. That needs to be recorded, and that gives public notice of the ownership then, and actually go to the courthouse and somebody can find out who owns the land via how it was recorded. You can have a will, or you can inherit the land. And that's according to the terms. If there's no will in many states, then it goes by heirs, blood-related heirs. So it's always important to have a will if you have real estate, if you want to control how it is distributed after your death. And then there's this adverse possession, which I talked about up here. And that's attaining ownership without delivery of the title. About 4 or 5 things have to happen for this. You have to possess it, and it must be actual and exclusive. You have total rights to it. You have to be doing this open and visibly and for the world to see. And you kind of defend it against the world. And then you need to... Let's say there's a vacant strip of land next to you, and the owner won't do anything with it. It's just god-awful, and you start taking care of it because it's detracting from the value of your land. And you do this and you just continue to do this out in the open against everybody. You don't hide the fact. After a certain period of time, in some places, that land can become yours simply by the fact that you are putting the land to productive use. That's called adverse possession. And then there's eminent domain, which is government seizure for the common good. Basically, what this says is private ownership is limited by superior ownership, and superior meaning the government. The United States of America, in theory, owns all of the land that is under the jurisdiction of the country. Private ownership can be overruled if that land is seen to be needed for the common good. They give you just compensation. It's usually fair market value. And condemning the land is part of the process of eminent domain. It's kind of a sour note to end on, but there's a question, and in part 2 we are going to look at landlord-tenant law, which is kind of interesting because I'm quite sure all of you at one time or the other will rent or be a landlord. So go do the question, and I will see you in part 2. Have a good day.